Welcome to Questions and Answers from
Quarantine.
with Pastor Chris McMichael. Hello there, welcome to episode 15 of Questions and Answers from Quarantine. I'm Chris McMichael coming to you from quarantine. And I guess this is our 15th episode, so we're over 2 weeks into this thing now. I've got a fascinating question today. If you've been following with us, these questions are all over the map. No real doctrinal flavor or vibe in any one direction. And I do my best to answer them. I don't have perfect doctrine. There is no such thing as perfect doctrine. We're all working out our own faith with fear and trembling and working out our salvation. My background is science, so I understand the scientific theory and the scientific principle. And one of the ways we build doctrine is by gathering as many scriptures as possible, building a construct or a premise from the scriptural evidence, and that's from which we begin to build a doctrine. Hermeneutically speaking, that's called a theological hermeneutic, and that just means you take all the scriptures and the entirety of God's revealed book, the Bible, and you begin to see what they say. And you can almost take scriptures like data points and see where they cluster together. There might be the occasional outlier here or there, and you might have to compensate for that. But generally speaking, the doctrines that God wants us to emphasize are pretty well clustered, and we can catch the heart of God and the essence of the kingdom by doing a topical study on whatever that doctrine is, that topic. So with all that said, let me say that today's question, I'm going to have to give you my opinion, because even though it's what I believe, I'm not dogmatic about this like I would be about salvation through Christ alone. I'm pretty dogmatic about evangelism. I'm dogmatic about tithes and offerings. I'm dogmatic about world missions. I'm dogmatic about excellence. I'm dogmatic about tongues and the gifts of the Spirit. This thing here, I'm not real dogmatic about it. Let me read you the question. On the apologetics topics of new earth versus old earth, are there scriptures that support an old earth interpretation of the Genesis creation account? I understand some scientific arguments, but what about in the Bible? All right, so what that is asking is there a biblical premise or a biblical basis for believing in an old earth? So full disclosure here, I'm a geologist. I trained for geology. I have a degree in geology. Though they are expired, I have 4 professional licenses in 4 different states. I worked as an engineering geologist with geotechnical engineering and as a mine geologist and a resource geologist, and I did environmental work, and I still do some consulting with a geotechnical engineering firm. So I'm a geologist. I had to kind of work all this out in my own doctrinal understanding 25 years ago. There's a lot of material out there, but full disclaimer, I am an old earth guy. I do not believe in evolution whatsoever. I don't even believe in microevolution, as it's called, much less macroevolution. I do believe in adaptation, and I believe in the full gamut of a gene pool being able to be proven out from freckles to red hair to blonde hair, to adaptation in a gene pool being, or a gene being able to be fully exhibited is like saying you can breed a Shih Tzu and you can breed a Great Dane, but in the end there's still a dog, and that's the full extremes of a dog's DNA. And in between you have wolves, and you have coyotes, and you have schnauzers, and you have the smallest little Chihuahuas, all the way up to the Great Pyrenees, the St. Bernards, the Great Danes, the lurching dogs of England. You have massive dogs and everything in between, and in the end there's still dogs. I believe in all that. It's adaptation, that's breeding, but you're not going to breed 2 dogs and get a chicken. So that aside, I'm an old earth guy. So the question is there any scripture for old earth? So this is all my opinion. I'm not the only one that holds this doctrine. I am what doctrinally is called a gap theorist. And a gap theorist says that between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, there is a gap of time. And I'll prove it to you from 2 passages, and you can just make your own decision. Genesis 1:1, let's start there and read it. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. So let's stop there. We know our God. We have 66 more books of the Bible by which we can understand and know our God. We know that our God creates things by speaking them into existence. And we know God declares a thing and it happens. We know what's about to happen in this story. And everything he declares, it comes to pass instantly. Fair enough? I think so. That's a premise. That's the presupposition moving forward. God creates the heaven, not plural, singular, the heaven and the earth. So we can assume, and I think safely, but I want to be fully transparent here, we can assume that everything he creates when he speaks is perfect. All right, Genesis 1:2. And the earth was without form and void. Wait a minute. I thought we just presumed, and agreed upon that anything God creates when he speaks in his perfection and his sovereign infinite power is perfect. So then how can the earth be without form, and how can it be void, and how can there be darkness upon the face of the deep? How can there be darkness when in God there is no darkness, no shadow of turning? God is light. So how can he just have finished created something, and in his creation, it's without form, it's void, and dark? This is where the premise or the explanation that's known as the doctrine of gap theory comes into play. The theory, and I prescribe to it, you don't have to, this is what we would call the non-essential doctrine. I'll address hardcore creationists or young earth creationists in a moment. This is where we say something had to have happened between verse 1 and verse 2. If we assume God creates everything perfectly, and then when we look at earth and zoomed in on verse 2, the earth is without form and void and darkness, what happened? What happened in between those two verses? And the Spirit of God hovered or moved upon the face of the waters, and God said, "Let there be light." All right, well, does that mean if he speaks light, it's without form and void and kind of sputtering? Light like a bick in the rain trying to strike a flame? Or do we also assume here when he says, "Let there be light," boom, light. And it was. I think we agree. When God speaks and God creates and God declares, it is. So we have to answer this question about verse 2. How is it the earth is without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters? So that's how the earth is in verse 2. Without form, without void, darkness, face of the deep, waters everywhere. Keep that in mind, okay? He goes on to say, God called the light day and called the darkness he called night. And this is where I want to insert that I am a Bible literalist. I believe in 6 literal days of creation because it says the evening and the morning were the first day. Evening, morning. I don't interpret this as some do to say these were 6 periods of creation. Some progressive secular Christians, even progressive theologians, they want to believe the Bible, but they want to believe in evolution too. And so they say, well, evolution is the means by which God created over 6 periods of time and not 6 literal days. But if God says in verse 5, evening and morning, then it means what we would understand to be a 24-hour period. So that's how we can understand that season of time right there, evening and morning. All right, so with that, let's jump over to Job 38, and we'll just hit these 2 passages for time's sake. Job 38, Job has been asking God questions. God has had enough. God's about to thump Job. God begins to thump Job. Verse 1, then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, this is one time when God is in the whirlwind. He's not in every whirlwind, but sometimes he is. Who is this that darkeneth understanding by words without knowledge? That would describe so much knowledge in the earth today. Words without knowledge. And that would describe most of the media and all of social media would be words without knowledge. Gird up now thy loins like a man, for I will demand of thee, and you will answer me. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? All right, pause. We're back to the creation account. All right, Job, you think you know everything. Where were you when I started this thing? Where were you when I created the heavens, or the heaven and the earth? Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Declare if you have any understanding. And who hath laid the measurements thereof, if you knowest, or who hath stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations of the earth fastened, or who laid the cornerstone thereof? These are questions Job can't possibly answer, and that's why God is asking them. I like to, sometimes in our church I point out, if God's asking questions, they're never for his benefit. They're always to show you something where you're wrong. Verse 7 is where we got to slow down and focus, because it's evident the previous 3 verses are all about creation and the foundation of the earth being made. Now remember, we're answering, is there any biblical evidence for an old earth account? Verse 7, because he's talking about the same period of time. Where were you when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? No doubt, very clearly, a reference to angels. This lets us know that angels were created before the earth was created. Angels were formed. In fact, Psalm 148, I'll turn there real quick. Psalm 148, it says, I'll start in verse 2. Praise you him, all you angels. Praise him, all his hosts. Praise him, sun and moon. Praise him, all you stars of light. Very famous worship song. I think it was a hill song back from the late 90s. Praise him, heavens of heavens, and you waters of heavens. Let them praise the name of the Lord. Man isn't listed in any of that yet. Praise him, angels. Praise him, all you hosts. Praise him, sun, moon, stars. Praise him, heavens of heavens, waters that be above the heavens. Let them praise the name of the Lord. For he commanded, and they were created. Here's another reference to how God creates. He commands, they exist. Boom. And Job 38 shows us the order. Angels were made first. In fact, that's what you see. Angels, hosts, then sun and moon, then stars, heaven of heavens, waters above the heavens. We see the exact same system or order here. He commands, they create, they are created. The morning stars, back to Job 38:7, they sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Or who shut up the sea with doors when it brake forth as it had issued out of the womb? Now you could apply that to Noah's flood because they issued forth out of the womb. But the way God promises to never flood the earth again in the book of Genesis chapter 6, 7, and 8, it sounds like this wasn't God's first time flooding the earth. And when we're introduced to the earth in Genesis 1, 2, waters cover the face of the deep. I'm telling you one doctrinal stance. You don't have to agree with it. I'm answering a question. I qualified it by saying this is my opinion, this is my belief, this is a non-essential doctrine, but this is the basis of the doctrine. Where were you, or who shut up the sea with the doors when it brake forth as it had issued out of the womb? Verse 9, when I made the cloud the garment thereof, and thick darkness a swaddling band for it. Sounds like Genesis 1, 2. Darkness covered the face of the deep. I made the cloud the garment there. There could be the glory cloud, the Spirit of God hovering over the face of the deep, and the waters covering the planet. And break up for it my decreed place, and set bars and doors. Verse 11, and said, hither thereto shalt thou come, but no further. Here shall thy proud waves be stayed. Verse 11, in my personal opinion, my belief, and how I would teach it, is what I see to be the judgment of Lucifer. So this is how this doctrine works out, that God made angels, then he made the earth, and we don't know how long between the creation of the earth and the judgment of Lucifer it took. We don't know how long that happened. But something happened. We know Lucifer was judged. We know, according to Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28, he was cast out of heaven, cast to the earth, kicked out of heaven, lost his royalty. He kept not his first estate, along with a bunch of other fallen angels. And what it appears to be is the Genesis account, according to the gap theory, is really the restoration of the earth and not the creation. It was created, God judged it, and now he's bringing out of it a restorative process. And then on the fourth day, he made the sun and the moon. So go sort that out for you. Evening and morning of the first day happened before there was a sun and a moon, but only after there was light. So is there an evidence for an old earth? I believe so, very heartily. If you get into geology, you hear about this thing called the Permian explosion, where all of a sudden, boom, you have all these animals in the fossil record. Then from that, you get into the Cretaceous, Jurassic, Triassic, which is your dinosaur period. Regardless of how you want to view the the fossil record and the massive gaps in the fossil record and zero transitional species, not even Archaeopteryx or Eohippus or any of these others. They claim to be transitional fossil species. There's just not a lot there. And when you do look at the fossil record and those creatures, they look to be a different model year. They look to be ancient. They're like a different model style. Just like a 57 Chevy doesn't look like a modern Chevy. The fossil record animals look archaic, primeval, primordial. They're not the same design pattern of the current animals we have on planet Earth. So that is my rough take on it. I could teach on this for quite a bit of time, especially if I got a chance to go brush up on some things. That's the evidence. There's a few more here and there. I do not subscribe to what's called the pre-Adamite theory. I think that is heresy. A lot of folks hold to pre-Adamites. You need to know that pre-Adamite doctrine actually began with Egyptians and Muslims. The Muslims believe that the jinns and the jinns were demons. That's where the word genie comes from. Jinn, a genie in a bottle. Demons in a cave in the middle of Arabia. They believe the jinns and the hens descended from human beings that preceded Adam. There are some Christians that hold to a pre-Adamite theory. A lot of modern-day pre-Adamite dates back to the 19th century, and it was used to make blacks look like they could not have possibly descended from Adam. They were descended from pre-Adamites. There was one famous theologian. His stuff is still taught. I think it's one of his worst subjects, but he passed away in the 60s or 70s. One of my mentors in the faith would have him come preach, and he said, I want you to come preach, but don't you dare touch that pre-Adamite junk. If you teach on pre-Adamites, I'll spend the next services telling everybody why you're wrong. Pre-Adamite, if you don't know, you can look it up. Don't subscribe to it. You can see what people believe about it. The Egyptians believed that their architecture and their knowledge came back from people that went back hundreds of thousands of years, and that feeds the whole premise of the pre-Adamites. It meant there was a race of people on earth before Adam. I totally reject that. I don't see enough evidence for it anywhere in the scripture, though some folks who still hold to it will cherry pick here and there. Oh, that's a lot to cover on old earth versus young earth. I hope that helps you. I probably maybe opened more questions than I answered any, but I'm a geologist. Let me say one word about young earth creationism. I don't care if you believe in young earth creationism, but don't be a belligerent jerk about it. There are some folks right now that young earth creationism is their idol, and they believe if you don't believe in young earth creationism that you're a heretic and a Christ mocker and a God denier. And if you're in that far of a vein of young earth creationism, you need to chill out and understand that there's more to the Bible than just creationism. I have watched a lot of young earth creationism videos, and as a geologist, as a caver, as someone who's really good at geotechnical engineering, structural geology, and hydrology and karst geology, some of those videos and what they want to believe, they willfully ignore and deny basic science to make it fit their construct. I don't have time to get into all that. That'd be another hour or two. Oh, well, call you blessed. Stay safe. Curse this coronavirus. Declare wisdom over our governments. And I'm cursing the Rasputin voices out of the ears of some of our officials. We'll see you at the next episode.